Matt Lenihan Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store. Delighted to be joined by Frank Smith. Frank, appreciate you giving us the time. Coming off the back of a terrific show in LA, another good Riyadh season card. Terence Crawford in a close fight comes out on top. Just talk to me about the week. It looked mental from what I could see online.
Yeah, look, spectacular event. It was always going to be a special event. You know, we always said it. When you look at what Riyadh season have created in Riyadh to date, and then started speaking about going to new markets. Obviously, got Wembley coming up as well, but LA first and foremost on August 3rd. You knew it was going to be special. You know, been lucky enough to do events all around the world, but you knew with their production values and what they bring, it was going to be another level, and it was. The show itself, some great fights on the card, well, unbelievable fights on the card. Eminem as well to top it off, just as a little added bonus as well. But everything around it, the fight week was sensational. Those two events at Santa Monica Pier, with a fight night as well added on. Three live fights added on to the workout on the Wednesday night. You had the Chinese theatre on the Thursday for the press conference, the Wayne at LA Live. Just looking at, you only had to look at the fight week to see what was coming on fight night, and it definitely delivered across the board.
Yeah, 100%. Boxing's in a really good place at the minute. We're seeing these big events after big events, and I was speaking to Frank Warren earlier, and it's nice to see some of the UK shows as well delivering. I know he's had two really good ones back to back as well. In terms of sort of the fallout from the LA show, we saw a bit of a back and forth between Canelo Alvarez and Turki Alalshikh, and I know you've probably referenced this in other interviews. What do you make of it? Obviously, Canelo, by many people's sort of recognition, is the face of boxing, and obviously he's standing his ground against sort of the man who's really he's changed boxing over the last 12 to 18 months. What do you make of their exchange in terms of what they want to do next?
Yeah, look, I think from Canelo's perspective, I guess he's saying he wants to focus on his fight ahead. It's only 6 weeks away now. It's the 5 or 6 weeks away until his fight against Edgar Berlanga. Turki Alalshikh has changed the sport of boxing in just 12 months. When you think of who he's brought together, and you look at, I remember the December show, but when you even look at last Saturday night, sort of 8 different promoters coming together to put on great fights and make fights people want to see. And it's for the benefit of boxing, so I think he's doing unbelievable things for the sport. He's a fan of boxing, obviously. He's going to continue to do that. Canelo is his own person. You're talking about two individuals who, Canelo's done unbelievable things in the sport of boxing. He's going to do what he wants to do. And he's going to set a price. And whether someone wants to pay that or not is up to the people paying it. But, it's an individual determining what their value is. Doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with it. And I think, people read into it quite a bit. His Excellency's plan is to continue making great fights in the sport of boxing. And that's what he's done to date, and I'm sure will continue to do.
100%. Do you think, when you look at Canelo, obviously, he's got the Berlanga fight coming up. There was the talk of Crawford in the build-up, and, Canelo, now after the Crawford fight, and we see how close it was, and by the way, I think a lot of people overlooked Israil Madrimov because maybe the amount of fights he's had, forgetting the fact he's had well over 200 amateur fights, I believe. I think close to 3. So it's not like he's come into this just a few fights in kind of thing. Can you see from his point of view why he's saying, look, if I fight Terence Crawford and I beat him, am I going to get any credit for that kind of thing? So for me to do that is going to require a big bag. It's going to require a couple of $100 million. Can you see that from his point of view?
Yeah, I mean, everything's got a price. At the same time, I think he'd look at the Terence Crawford fight. And like you say, Israil Madrimov was written off by a lot of people because of 10 fights up to that point. Because people looked at it and go, how does this guy stand a chance? He gave Terence Crawford his toughest fight to date, and arguably the scorecards could have gone either way and people wouldn't have complained. I don't think by any means it was a robbery. Like, I think either man could have won that night. I think it was a close fight. But I think, in my opinion, Canelo probably would have watched that at 154 and gone, can you imagine what? Because it is a big jump, even to 154 from where he started. So then to go to 168 as well against Canelo Alvarez, who has ruled the division for years and years and years. It would take a lot of balls, obviously, from Terence Crawford to do that. So in part, I understand it. On the other side, I maybe think you'd look at it and go, that's easy work for me in terms of getting paid, because there's tough fights at 168 as well. But he's gonna do whatever he feels right. Like I say, it's one individual's opinion of what he wants to do. He's the one who makes the decisions in his career. And yeah, I think anything's possible in the sport of boxing. Anything's possible tomorrow. You don't know what, on September 15th, who knows what happens. Maybe he comes out of that fight, Edgar Belanga's knocked him out, and we're not talking about that fight anymore. So you've got to take it step by step and day by day, because things can change hourly in this game.
Yeah, I was going to say, nothing's a given in boxing anyway. You know yourself. I'm sure you've had conversations that change, within the minute kind of thing with all the meetings and that you have. But in terms of Crawford, obviously Vergil Ortiz, fight of the year contender, came through it, had to go through a bit of adversity. I know His Excellency was talking about Crawford, Vergil Ortiz. Is that a fight that excites you from in terms of like a world boxing scene, if Crawford's to stay at that weight?
Yeah, I think it's a great fight if he's to stay at that weight. I don't know whether he moved back. I don't know if he can move back down. I'm not sure where he's at, but I think it's a great fight. I think I didn't watch the Vergil Ortiz fight, but a few people I've spoken to have said that it was probably the scorecards went the wrong way in that one. They'd like to see a rematch, possible fight of the year contender, as you say.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, that would be a great fight as well. All these fights are fights people want to see. And, with His Excellency's investment into the sport and passion for the sport, it means we're getting to see fights that maybe in the past wouldn't have been possible. I was just talking yesterday, when you think about what he's done in 10 months, the fights he's delivered in 10 months. And if you would have said that back in October, or, October, they just started maybe, but sort of September time, you'd go, you're mad. But I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to continue to see big fights people want to see. And I think it's a great thing for the sport of boxing and everyone involved in it.
We mentioned the Canelo fight with Berlanga and obviously that fight there, but do you think that in terms of like, we're going to see more of these Riyadh season cards in the UK? We're getting that one at Wembley. I feel like that's almost like it's been given back to the UK because we've had so many big shows abroad, and it's like this is what we're doing. We've done a bit in the US, doing this in Wembley. Do you think we're going to start seeing more of that over the next 12 to 18 months, a potential, Riyadh season card, or a couple, or maybe a 5v5?
Yeah, hopefully. Look, I obviously don't represent Riyadh season, so I can't talk on their behalf, but I think just with what they've shown, with the scale of shows like August 3rd, like with September 21st at Wembley, as you say, Anthony Joshua, Daniel Dubois, all British heavyweight world championship, huge night, a huge undercard as well. I think they're showing that they want to expand the reach outside of not just in Riyadh will, I guess, always be key. Again, I don't know, but I would think always be key. But I think with the passion they have for boxing and, the marketing profile it brings as well, for sure, I think we'll see more shows down the line.
When you look at Dubois, Joshua, I was speaking to Frank Warren a couple of hours ago. I'm really looking forward to that, and asking him to sort of break it down. And I said, would this be like the icing on top of the cake for you in terms of the Queensberry Matchroom thing? And he's like, that would be the cherry on top of the icing on top of X, Y, and Z. And he said when he talks about the fight, he just believes that Daniel has been in with better opposition. What do you make of when you hear that? Obviously, Anthony Joshua's resume is, it's quite deep and it's stacked up for the last 10 years. When you hear Frank say, Daniel has had the better opposition, they've had similar opponents. Obviously, they had Usyk, they've both been in there with him. What do you think he's referring to on his record when he talks about that?
No, look, I think for sure Daniel's had tough opposition at a young age. He's 26 years old?
Yeah.
I think, something like that. And a bit like Hughie Fury, in a sense of, like in the early stage of their career, went in real tough fights and took real tests, which, don't get me wrong, is great, and not enough fighters are doing it. But at the same time, in the heavyweight division, you learn on the job more than ever. And I think Anthony Joshua is in the form of his life. I think the momentum has been key for that. I think the confidence has been key for that. And, I've said a few times, when you look back to the early days of Anthony Joshua, when he won the world title, he was in some ways not rushed, but he couldn't keep developing because every fight was a big fight every 6 months or so. And he didn't have that momentum because he was in big fights. You couldn't do those huge stadium fights every 3 months. It wouldn't be possible. So in many ways, obviously, look, it was beneficial for his career. He became a superstar off the back of it and earned a lot of money. But I think for where he's at now, he's the most rounded fighter you've seen and the most sort of comfortable Anthony Joshua. And I think I truly believe he's going to do a job on Daniel Dubois. I don't think it'll be an easy fight, but I believe he'll knock out Daniel Dubois.
I saw Oleksandr Usyk's comments about being open to an Anthony Joshua trilogy, obviously saying he gave him, the fights prior, and it helped sort of boost Oleksandr's profile. This AJ now, in comparison to the two AJ performances we've seen against Usyk, would you go into that fight with more confidence, thinking, there's a reasonable chance that Anthony could turn the tide against Usyk? Obviously, he's got Tyson Fury to deal with. We ain't looking past that. But just going off comments that he's previously said.
I think when you look at the second fight, the improvements he made in that second fight against Oleksandr Usyk, it was a closer fight the second time round. I think, like I said, Anthony Joshua is in the best position he's been in since he's been professional. And yeah, I believe he can beat him. I believe they can all beat each other. I believe Tyson Fury could go in there and beat Oleksandr Usyk. It's not a foregone conclusion. Look, he was up ahead after 6 or 7 rounds.
Yeah.
Oleksandr Usyk finds a way. Usyk had Fury more hurt than he ever had AJ. You can put sort of pull these comparisons out of all these different fights and look at them all. But I do think Anthony Joshua can beat Oleksandr Usyk. But they've both got focuses on big fights ahead of them, and let's see what 2025 holds.
I watched the Froch on fighting bit earlier, and I think Froch and AJ have sort of settled the differences from what I can understand anyway. But Carl's won for a line. He's come out with impossible for Joshua to beat Usyk unless he has a bat in the ring. Does that seem a bit harsh, all things considering?
Yeah, I think so. Like I say, you look at the second fight; it was a much closer fight the second time round. When Anthony fought Usyk, I think, like I say again, I'll go back to the same point. They can all beat each other on their best night, and that's why we love heavyweight boxing. So I don't really agree with that statement of Carl Froch, but then a lot of people don't agree with a lot of statements of Carl Froch. So I won't be any different.
He was referring to the Fury Usyk fight as well, saying that if Tyson was to lose to Oleksandr Usyk in the second fight, that would be it for him. Do you think that if Tyson takes a loss to Usyk in this fight, I suppose maybe it depends on the manner of defeat. If that happens, look, he could well go in there and just flip the script and beat Usyk, like you said. They can all beat each other. Do you expect him to carry on?
I think every individual is different. It depends on where you're at with your career, what you want from it. So many fighters we've looked at over the years and gone, they should retire now. And then they've come back stronger and in massive fights. So it does very much depend on how the fight goes. He might win and go, I don't fancy this anymore. We've seen Tyson Fury's retired before, so anything's possible. But yeah, it's hard to say now. Do you think because he's ultimately, the way I look at it, he's been beat by pound for pound, arguably the number one in the sport right now, who's dominated at cruiserweight, dominated at heavyweight. How can you look at that and go, do you know what? But it's more the drive. Like, what is your drive then? Because he's made a lot of money. So what do you want from the sport is probably the bigger question.
Yeah. Last couple from me. Your boy, Dmitry Bivol, it's coming up. Really, I'm sort of, obviously with the pushback, it's sort of, I don't want to say gone under the radar, but now it's sort of, we're moving towards that end of the year and we're realising we are going to see this fight. How excited is to see this fight? For me, when you'd have asked me at the start of the year, like the top 3 fights, this one would sit comfortably in the top 3 of fights you want to see. But convinced he does a job on Artur Beterbiev still?
Yeah, 100%. I think, look, it's an amazing fight. It's a fight we've wanted for a long time. And I think Dmitry, it's a shame because in that Zinad fight, which obviously was last minute replacement, he looked unbelievable. He'd had the best training camp, because he knew what was ahead of him. I think you only see the best of Dmitry Bivol when he's in there against the greats. But in that Zinad fight, he was fired up. He knew what he had to do. And, many people could have said he would have overlooked it and just coasted through. But it was an amazing performance from him. And I think the Beterbiev fight, I think the lack of activity for Beterbiev now off the back of this injury isn't going to be ideal for him, especially at his age. But it's a tough fight. We all know what Beterbiev brings, but I think Dmitry Bivol's on another level. I think he's going to do a job on October 12th.
100%. Right, Matchroom, in terms of shows you've got coming up, Diego Pacheco's back out. Dalton Smith in another sort of carefully crafted matchup. Pleased with the schedule that you guys are putting together. I know that Prograis and Catterall has had to be put back, but happy. And is there going to be some more shows announced?
Yeah, look, that was obviously Catterall program was obviously supposed to be August 24th. Unfortunately, injury to Catterall means we've delayed that to October 26th. I'm glad the fight's still happening because it's a great fight. So I'm glad we could get it up and running quickly. August 31st, Diego Pacheco's back out against Selecki. I think is a real test for him. You know, I don't think you saw the best of Diego in his last fight, and I think this is the perfect kind of fight for him next. So he's back out there. We're announcing the undercard in the next 24, 48 hours on that one as well. Then we've got our Mexico show on which is September 13th as well. Rocky Hernandez back out. September 14th, Edgar Berlanga takes on Canelo Alvarez for the super middleweight titles. September 21st, Anthony Joshua goes and knocks out Daniel Dubois on the Riyadh season card. September 28th, Dalton Smith challenges for the European title. I think that was a fight that he's wanted the European title regardless of opponent since he turned pro. He's won all the other belts. He took a real step up against the Pader in his last fight. Unbelievable performance. I think some people may overlook Fernandez as an opponent, but it's a tough test. He's a big puncher. But I think he wants to, like I say, he wants to win the belt. He wanted Adam Azim. He withdrew, obviously, from that fight. But that's a great fight. And then, we're working on the rest of the schedule now, October through to December.
Well, just touch on Dalton just a little bit in terms of when you look at his career, the step-ups he's had. I feel like he's had all the right step-ups at the right time. You mentioned with Anthony Joshua in his career, there was an opportunity there to get the IBF title. So it's one of them where you have to jump and take it, but you miss maybe the times of improving. He's had step by step by step. That's a payday. He's a tough fighter for anybody who did the research. Like, he came in, but Dalton did a calculated job on him. How pleasing is it to see that he's going down this route, European next, then obviously fringe world title challenger level kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, he could have probably missed out this fight here in terms of the European title in a sense of he would have been open to going to one of those fringe world title, one of those names, even a step up from Zepeda. But I think Fernandez, albeit not got maybe the profile as much as some of these other names, it's a real test for him, and it's going to be a test and exactly the kind of fight he needs. After that, for our aim is at mid part of next year, get him a world title shot. And we believe he's ready for that, especially after the back of that Zepeda performance. I think, now we've got some momentum with him as well. He's had injuries, he's had cuts before this. Now the focus is keep him busy, keep him active, and get those big fights for him. So, he's on a great path and someone we've invested heavily in, because we believe he's got a massive future and, a massive following in Sheffield as well.
Last one from me. I'm not saying boxing is becoming less stressful, but has your lives behind the scenes become a tiny bit easier, maybe with the lines of communication? I'm talking about in terms of promotions. We've seen, yourselves and Queensbury in particular, and I know you've always, we mentioned the Boxer situation where you've had fighters on their shows and always been willing to do business, but with all these promoters coming together, you mentioned the LA card, is it seemingly more open? Like, are people more open to having these conversations? Obviously, with his excellence, his influence, is things becoming easier to make kind of thing?
I think boxing's always going to be a challenging sport, and we're all, as much as people can get along, at the same time, we're always going to be competitors to a certain extent. So there's always going to remain some level of tension, maybe the wrong word, but the relationships are good. They always have been good between people. Like, there's been certain individuals between businesses who will talk, across all of the promoters. So I think that's been there. It's obviously, got better over the last year, and that's down to His Excellency and Riyadh season and what they've brought across. I think boxing, as I said earlier, is in a brilliant position, because if we can all make fights, and I've always said this, if there's great fights happening regardless of promoter, it's only going to be beneficial for the sport that we're all involved in. If we can all grow the sport of boxing and make it bigger, better, and a sport people want to watch because they're seeing fights that they're interested in, then it's beneficial. Doesn't matter whether it's us promoting it or the man next door, So I think it's a great time for boxing, and long may it continue.
Yeah, 100%. Shakur Stevenson, any update with him? I know you were keen on signing him. He's been tasked. I heard Eddie say he's been tasked with trying to make the Zepeda fight, which I think is actually a brilliant fight. But obviously, you want to time down to Matchroom. Are we closer? What's going on?
obviously Eddie's been in discussions. He spent some time with them over the last month or so, or whenever, and there's a good relationship there. I think Shakur appreciates what Eddie brings, and you only have to look at. I was there at the press conference when Eddie was reeling it all off in LA the other week. Shakur was in the front row, smiling, laughing, because I think he sees maybe he hasn't had that promotion. Look, Top Rank obviously did a great job, but Bob's older, the older generation now. He's obviously a legend and hero of the sport, but Eddie's still very active, and he knows how to sell a fight and a fighter. So hopefully we can do something. Every man and their dog's going to be after Shakur Stevenson, obviously, because he's a special fighter. But I'd love it if we could get something over the line with.
100%. Frank Smith, appreciate you taking time out and giving Boxing Social some time as per. And yeah, we'll catch up soon, hopefully, when there's a fight announced.
No worries, mate. Good to catch up.
Appreciate it.